Namo myoho renge kyo, namo myoho renge kyo, namo myoho renge kyo. Hi, thank you for being here. Bonjour, buen vida, buenos dias, moshi moshi. Gonna embarrass myself now, so get on with business. I hope you're in good health today, enjoying your practice. Thank you for supporting this endeavor. Like, subscribe. Patrons, you make this possible, whether through Patreon or direct through PayPal. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, you definitely bodhisattvas of the earth. So after this long gatha, praising Bodhisattva Kashyapa, Shakyamuni said the following. Well said, O good man. You have not yet arrived at all knowledge, but I am he who has attained it. You now ask about the deepest depths of the undisclosed doctrine. Now, O good man, I, sitting under the Bodhi tree, first attained right enlightenment. At that time, in all Buddha lands, as numerous as the sands of countless asamkhayas of Ganges, there were bodhisattvas. They too asked of me the meaning of this deepest doctrine. And what they said, and the virtue thereof, were thus the same, not different. Asking thus, great benefits accrue to all beings. So, this is a statement that, again, validates and praises just the asking of the question, the curiosity, the aspiration to. That's an incredibly important, if not critically necessary step in our practice, is to always be aspirational, curious, right? All of these words we constantly read about resolve, determination, steadfastness, from Nichiren all the way back to Shakyamuni, right? Is the one thing that will assure you of attainment is that you're constantly focused on working toward it. And you'll achieve it moment to moment as you chant the Daimoku and open your Gohonzon mind. Your ninth consciousness will not only awaken, but be present, remain present throughout your life. That said, we are still samsaric beings, so our senses are on the right, our cravings and clinging, they're not that easily brushed away. So they creep back in. But over time, our ninth consciousness becomes, I don't want to say stronger, so much as maybe subdues that samsaric, right? We talk about it as purifying of the senses. Maybe purifying is too, Catholic a term. Maybe we should be saying that what occurs is our ninth consciousness over time imbues, influences, and subdues those attachments, those cravings and clinging, to the point where they continue to exist, the subject of our desires, but our aspiration to enlightenment takes over primacy of place. And so that all of these things that normally we gotta have it, become more, it's nice to have it, but it's not necessary to have it. But this is there if I should so choose to have it. And now, when I, quote, have it, it's not formative of who and what I actually am. That's where we're getting to. The dissolution of that self, that samsaric picture identification with, as our ninth consciousness becomes more the driving force of our experience of life. All of those things, quote unquote, that we normally would crave or cling to become like little horses on the merry-go-round, right? They're not so real. They're entertaining. They're fun to watch. This is also why, as we read constantly, we become much more adept and aware of other people's karma, other people's attachments, other people's cravings and clinging, other people's struggles with what we in general call Mara. That's what all those desires are, deflecting and influencing us away from our aspiration to Buddhahood. That's what we're reading about all the time in Buddhism, right? That mental battle. Buddhism's about the mind, remember? So I stuck in my 2 cents here. Let's see what I wrote. Was not the Lotus Sutra the answer to these questions? I think it is the purpose of this final teaching to capture all those students for whom the Lotus Sutra was difficult to accept and to comprehend. I'm using Shakyamuni's own words, right? In the final days of his life, Shakyamuni, in his limitless compassion, gave this last teaching, the MahaPariNirvana, to capture those that might otherwise be lost. And then again, it may be just as Nichiren tells us, that for some, it is simply not the time for their capacity. This may also explain why just a few moments ago, Shakyamuni offered to re-instruct on the basics of practice. Right? We just got through reading that. All right, moving on. Then Bodhisattva Kashyapa said to Shakyamuni Buddha, O world-honored one, the power of my wisdom does not extend thus far as to put such deep questions to Shakyamuni Buddha. O world-honored one, this is like a mosquito or sawfly that cannot fly over a great sea or fly around in the high and pure lands. The same with me. I have no power to ask the Tathagata field about this great sea of wisdom or the meaning of the great depths of space-like extension of the Dharmata, the experience of Dharma. Dharma is the experience of Buddha, the enlightened state, the Tathagata field. O world-honored one, this is like a king who hands over to the hands of the officer in charge of treasures a bright gem that was housed in the knot of his hair, and the officer, on receiving it, increases the guard. The same is the same with me. Having received the depths of Shakyamuni Buddha's Mahayana teaching, I shall guard it all the more carefully. Why? This is but to make me attain the great depths of wisdom. Then Shakyamuni said to Kashyapa, O good man, listen clearly. Listen clearly. He says it twice. I shall now tell you the cause of the Tathagata field's longevity of lifespan. Isn't this right out of the Lotus Sutra, right? There's a whole chapter about the lifespan of the Tathagata field. The Bodhisattva, through this action, gains long life. So there's that duality again. The Bodhisattva, you and I, as samsaric beings, but there's bodhisattva-ness, right? The caring aspect of human being, the compassionate aspect of human beings, the teaching aspect and support aspect of human beings. We talk about it all the time, in and out of Buddhism, yeah? The basic generosity, humanity of one to another, right? Our first instinct, even for those who bury that instinct, is to help others. So always this double tongue, right? The bodhisattva, through this action, gains long life. For this reason, listen with your best attention. Having listened, speak of it to others. Bodhisattva. O good man, having thus practiced, I attained unsurpassed Bodhi. This is how I myself, Shakyamuni Buddha, this is how I arrived at this enlightened state, Buddhahood. So just do as I've done. I'm your primary example. I, for all beings' sake, now speak of this. O good man, as an example, a prince transgresses against state law and is chained up in prison. The king pities him and, riding on a palanquin, goes himself to the prison because he loves the prince. The same with the bodhisattva. If he desires to have a long life of influence and inspiration to other beings to induce them into the aspiration for enlightenment, he should guard and protect beings and view them as one would one's only son. People gonna mistake. People gonna people. Right? People gonna human. And abide in great loving kindness, great compassion, great joy, and great equanimity. Be patient. Sometimes it's hard to be patient, but try your best, yes? Again, my 2 cents. This is the Bodhisattva of the Lotus Sutra, of course, right? This is what we were taught in the Lotus. The distinction is that the Bodhisattva of the Lotus Sutra is capable of experiencing Buddha and can thereby experience the full clarity of Tathagata-ness, or Buddha, in this saha, physical realm, yes? This is in fact what Shakyamuni Buddha, Shakyamuni, is the embodiment of. While traveling through India, his influence, i.e. lifespan, will now go on for millennia as his teachings will penetrate the lives of countless peoples. Bodhisattva in teachings prior to the Lotus were limited in their lifespan as arhats, whose life would end and no longer have remaining influence on the life of others toward enlightenment in this saha realm. This was one great limitation and incompleteness of the semblance or counterfeit dharma. Right? They hadn't reached the other shore. They just were no longer in this world, in this saha world. Their influence, their life, truly ended, or fizzled out, if you will, over time. Certainly some people thought of them for a while. But there was no mechanism for their teachings to continue. Whereas with the enabled Buddha, that teaching could be sown into each individual because we all have it innately. And therefore, with simple support and compassion, dialogue, one could keep alive this goal, this aspiration to Buddhahood. lest it fall into the hands of rhetoricians. Rhetoricians? Did I just make up a word? You know, when it becomes a religion, it loses its aspiration. It becomes something everyone is begging for, waiting to somehow rain out from, I don't know, a person, a cloud, a planet. It's already built in. This is the great lesson of the Lotus Sutra, right? Perfection of wisdom talks about it ad nauseum, but the Lotus makes it clear that mind is where Buddha is located. All of us have it. Also, Shakyamuni continues, he should impart the precept of non-harming to them and teach them to practice all good things. Also, he must let all beings abide quietudefully in the 5 moral precepts and the 10 good deeds. Furthermore, he will get into such realms as hell, hungry pretas, animal, asuras, and free all these beings from where they are suffering, emancipating those not yet emancipated. Pass over those who have not yet gained the other shore, give direction to lead to nirvana those who have not yet attained it, and console all those who live in fear. Acting thus, the bodhisattva gains longevity of life and the unmolested, unlimited freedom in knowing. What is knowing? Experiencing. And when the end comes, he gains life in the minds of others and the attainment of their pure lands. Do you see? Do you see how the continuum is? Buddhahood, not transferred, but living as an aspiration for those to gain it for themselves. Long life, as I mentioned here, should be understood to be a long influence by virtue of successfully imparting the aspiration to enlightenment on others. Life in Buddhism is measured as the propagation of the aspiration to Buddhahood on others rather than a chronicling of time. Well put, Sylvain. Good job. All right. Then Bodhisattva Kashyapa said to Shakyamuni, O world-honored one, you say that the Bodhisattva Mahasattva regards all beings just as one views one's only son. The thought, it's too profound. I cannot fathom it. O world-honored one, you say that the Bodhisattva views beings as an all-equal mind and views them as he would look upon his only son. But things are not so. Why not? Because amongst the Buddhas, there are those who break the moral precepts, those who commit deadly errors, and those who transgress against the wonderful Dharma. How can it be that he, Shakyamuni Buddha, can have the same attitude of mind towards them as toward his only son? Well, Kashyapa must not have a son because he doesn't understand that when you have your own flesh and blood making serious errors, the depth of it hurts, right? You want to correct it. You want to reach into that, right? We should see all people that way. Every single person we see day in and day out, on the bus, on the sidewalk, in the mall, at work, in the home, as those who are nascent Buddhas but don't know it. Please don't do that, please. You're only doing harm to yourself. This is the kind of thought. This is the bodhisattva, yeah? Shakyamuni Buddha said to Kashyapa, "It is so, it is so. I view all beings as I view my own son, Rahula. Like I'm talking to you right now, right?" Bodhisattva Kashyapa, he's having a hard time with this. And he says to Shakyamuni Buddha, "Oh, world-honored one, once on the 15th of the month, on the day of Posada, the day preceding the lunar quarters, a sacred weekly day or Sabbath, among the congregated who were strict and pure in the moral precepts, there was a boy who did not quite seriously observe the three actions of body, mouth, and mind. He hid himself in the dark place and secretly listened to what was said. Guyapada, the 24 protective deities of the 24 devas, sometimes reduced to the 20 protective deities, or the 20 devas, are a group of dharmapalas in Chinese Buddhism who are venerated as defenders of the Buddha's dharma. Receiving the divine power of Shakyamuni Buddha, crushed this boy into dust with a vajra, a sharpened bar, or a double-headed weapon. O world-honored one, Guddhapada acted so badly that the boy's life was taken. How could you look upon all beings as you do your own Rahula?" So he's referring to, one of the stories, folklore surrounding the teachings. They're not all necessarily Shakyamuni's stories, but, right? And even in Shakyamuni's stories, there are some pretty horrific ones, yeah? Shakyamuni Buddha said to Kashyapa, "Do not speak thus. This boy was none but a transformed or an illusory protected one, not a true one. This was but to repress breaking of the precepts and transgression against Buddha Dharma, and to remold beings. Even the Vajra and also Guyapada were transformed existences." Do you understand what that means before I go on? Remember, Shakyamuni, and I've talked about this ad nauseum, so I won't talk about it long here, but just as a reminder, in his stories, Shakyamuni uses personages, examples, like Little Red Riding Hood, right? And the wolf, who, in the story of Red Riding Hood, disguises himself as the grandmother and talks to Little Red Riding Hood. Of course, this is a fantasy. The point of the story is illustrated by this nonsensical talking wolf who can dress up as a woman. Come on. If you look at it literally, it's nonsense. But if you look at it metaphorically, it's quite a valuable lesson, yes? The way evil intent can consume you. So what Shakyamuni is reminding Kashyapa is you can't read that literally. It's an example. It's made as an inspiration to those to not falter. That there are grave consequences to not only lose your aspiration, but work against it. So that's what that story is about. You missed the metaphor, and you're taking it literally. You see? O Kashyapa, there are in the world those who slander the wonderful Dharma. Ichantikas, for instance, which we'll be talking about at length later. Those who harm others. We see them every day. Oh my goodness, look around. How many wars are going on the planet right now? Over 100, I believe. You don't hear about them all, but they're happening. It's unconscionable, the amount of violence today. And why do we feel bad about that? Why does it stir up so much emotion? Think about it. If all of those people we think about as our only child, what do we do? What are you doing? How can I stop this madness? This is when I usually implore you with me to chant. Make your practice strong, because only our influence will alter this. Look at the sizable task we have at hand, fellow bodhisattvas of the earth. Yeah, all other problems pale to this one, yeah? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. So here Shakyamuni is making the point. Those who abide in twisted views, right? Especially these days in Buddhism, there's some really twisted views out there, right? Chant for stuff. What? How non-Buddhist is that? Yeah, enlightenment is stuff, own stuff. It's bright and shiny. Yay! It's nuts. We live in this degenerate world. It was predicted 3,000 years ago by Shakyamuni. All the more reason to stay steadfast, really savor your practice. I mean it. Don't see how fast you can chant or how many daimoku you can do in a day. That's a distraction. That's Dairaku Tenmao. Better to sit focused with deep, profound appreciation. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Yes, savor each syllable. Much more valuable. Much more helpful. O good man, to illustrate, when the officers of the royal court break state law, the king punishes according to the rules relating to the errors committed and does not leave the officers unpunished. Shakyamuni Buddha does not act thus. He makes those who violate the precepts undergo such procedures as being driven out, reprimanded, put under surveillance, impeached or banished from the community of monks for non-confirmation of the errors committed, for non-humility, and for non-forsaking of twisted views. The reason, O good man, why Shakyamuni Buddha imposes the suppressive moral precepts on those who slander Dharma arises from the fact that he desires to show those who transgress that karmic consequences ensue for what one has done. O good man, know that Shakyamuni Buddha desires to bestow on malevolent beings what need not be feared. He emits 1, 2, or 5 beams so that those who encounter this light will be rid of all malevolent acts. Now, the Tathagata field, source of Buddha, has so many uncountable means of such power. And again, going back to the Lotus and other, the power of discerning somebody's errors. What may look on the surface as the same error of many people is in fact an individual interpretation and varying commitment to those errors. They're not all the same. And with the power of our practice and our enlightenment, we can see the differences and we can apply tasks to help those get purified, right? Get seen under the proper light so that those persons, those children of ours can make reparations in the form of changing their behavior so that they might not be swayed again in those realms, those worlds, those influences. This is the ardor, the endurance, the dukkha of the samsaric life, the saha life. This is why it's called dukkha. All life is dukkha. Why? Dukkha means endurance, stress, difficulty. And with the aspiration of Buddhahood, those difficulties become minor obstacles, curiosities. They don't hold our attention. O good man, if you desire to see Dharma which cannot be seen, I will now explain to you all about what you can see. When I have entered nirvana, a bhikshu who is perfect in the comportment of a bhikshu, and who observes wonderful Dharma, may come across one who transgresses. Oh yeah, it's going to happen. If this bhikshu drives away, reproaches, impeaches, or remolds such a malevolence doer, he will bequeath with weal, which one cannot measure or tell of. O good man, to illustrate, there is a tyrant king who does malevolent things and happens to suffer very seriously from illness. The king of a neighboring state, hearing of this, mobilizes the army to overthrow the state. At this, the king, having no power to resist the attack, critically introspects and tries to do good. And the weal of the king of this neighboring state will be uncountable. The same with the precept-observing bhikshu. If he drives away or reproaches those who act against Dharma and makes them do good, an incalculable amount of weal will be his. Let me tell you a short anecdote to describe this. I had a young member in my group at one time who grew up in a lot of negative influences, neighborhoods of a lot of violence, drugs, traffic, gangs, that kind of thing. And he moved down to a neighborhood where I lived around a lot of what we today would call white privilege, right? Just a well-to-do neighborhood, but still plenty of violence and spurious bad behaviors, just not at the level of maybe this other town, this other reality for this other gentleman. Anyway, his actions caught up with him, and he ended up going to prison for a while. And we didn't see him around. And one night he showed up, and I was we had just got done with a youth meeting. We had chanted for a while, and we had done Gongyo. And then we were sitting around just having refreshments, and I had several young men. I'll say they were around 14, 15, 16, that age group. And in this gentleman walks. He'd gotten out of prison, and he now was so emaciated. He used to be this big bodybuilder type, just huge man, and he commanded, because of his physical presence, a lot of respect from these little, it's kind of sad to see these little 13, 14, 15-year-old boys. They're like gadflies, Oh, wow, where you been? What's going on? Wow, you look so different. What happened? Blah, blah, blah. All curious, little buzzing around him. And right away, it just made me, I didn't like to see how they were fawning over this really poor example of a young man who was a few years their senior, yeah? He was like 19, 20 years old, 20, 21 maybe. Anyway, he was a man compared to these children, these teens, young teens, yeah? And he's starting telling them anecdotes and showing them, scars from bullet wounds where he got shot. Oh, my goodness, the teens are just, oh, wow. And I watched this going on, and I must admit, somewhat puzzled and somewhat, my heart was just, my stomach was turning. I found myself incapable of what in the hell do I do to protect these, my only children, right? From this terrible, terrible influence, and at the same time, wanting this gentleman to learn from his incarceration, for crying out loud. He didn't seem to have learned anything. And I finally, at one point, I'd had enough. I said, okay, stop all this. And I used my big boy voice. I got everyone's attention. And I told him, what are you doing? You've just spent how many years now in prison over your terrible behavior. And here you come. First thing you do is you walk in here to these impressionable youth and you start glorifying your evil behavior, your terrible behavior. What the hell is wrong with you? Why don't you get the lesson? Why don't you learn to become a better man? Oh man, I'm just talking, I'm just sharing. I'm not trying to do. Yeah, you may not think that you're trying to, but you are. The thing that's driving you is your ego. And you're trying to impress these young people with the amazing conquests you've had. But I'm here to tell you, you haven't learned a damn thing. Now I want you to get out of this house. Get out, go away right now. And of course, then I got the rebuttal, or you're not very Buddhist, or you're not being compassionate, or you're not helping me out. You're not a good example to these people. Everything, and it was amazing to hear so much Buddhist rhetoric coming out of this guy, trying to justify his actions and put me down. And through the whole thing, I said, you don't understand. You need to leave. Get out of this house now. You're going to make me? I mean, it got down to that. And I just stood my ground. Get out. And finally, he moved slowly, with every step making his point, but still toward the door. And he ended up leaving. And then it was quiet. And it gave me an opportunity to tell people, my children, as well as the adults left in the room, some of whom were related to that gentleman. So I really stood on my Buddhist soapbox. And I told him that his behavior is unacceptable. And hopefully driving him away from all of this attention that he wishes to receive for whatever brownie points he thinks that gives him. If he ever hopes to see it again, he'll have to address us differently. And hopefully that will teach him. He may never learn. But rest assured, if he doesn't learn, he will not be accepted into this house. He must introspect on his own behavior and understand that his goals, his ego, should be satisfied by being something much better than he presents today, right? Anyway, I don't remember everything I said at that time. It was almost 30 years ago. But this is the kind of parenting that was necessary. And this is exactly what Shakyamuni is talking about. Sometimes you have to slap the ruler on the table. Enough is enough. Because that is the only way to make the teachings priority. Right? We can't allow ourselves to be swayed because this is the actions of Dairakuten no Mao, making obstacles in our practice. And if not that individual, certainly the other teens that were in the room heard the lesson. And I'd have to chant that night and forever on afterward that those teens would get that lesson. Right? Because they tasted the poison of this behavior. Right? It's not like they missed it. So obviously, karmically, they were disposed to it. Not predisposed, but disposed to it. Right? It's in all our karma. And the influences that come into our life affect our worldview, our actions. So once again, this is the story of staying on task. Steadfastness. All right, where are we time-wise? All right, I need to wrap this up for today. Okay, I'll finish Shakyamuni's dialogue here, and then we'll call it for the day. O good man, as an illustration, in the fields and around the houses where a rich man dwells grows many poisonous trees. Seeing this, he fells all of them, and there is no more of them. Or white hair appears on the head of a young man. He feels humility of it, cuts it off, and does not allow his hair to grow long. The same is the case with a precept upholding bhikshu. If he sees any person who breaks the precepts and transgresses against the wonderful Dharma, he should drive away, reproach, and impeach such a person. If a good bhikshu, seeing one who transgresses against Dharma, does not drive away, reproach, or impeach such a person, know that this bhikshu is the enemy of the Buddhist teaching. Wow. So doing nothing is not an option, because you become complicit in allowing that to fester. If he drives away, reproaches, or impeaches such a one, he is my disciple, a true disciple. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Yeah, and as in my anecdote, it was not easy, but I knew I had to do it. Believe me, it would have been much easier to just go in the kitchen, make myself a sandwich, and let him play out. But what would I have done to my children, my one and only children, yes? Remember, that's how we need to see others. I needed to reprimand him as much as I needed to show them that that was incorrect, that was wrong, that was poisonous. Everybody learned, including myself, yeah? All right, we'll pause there. As always, I'm so deeply appreciative of your participation, of your practice, of course, without which none of this would matter. Oh, what did I do with the... Oh, here it is. Right? So, please, take care of your health so that you can keep your practice strong. Support this channel if you can with Patreon or PayPal. And if not, like and subscribe to the video. It does a lot for us. Your support means everything. We're not monetized. So for your practice, please be confident. Be steadfast. Savor it. And I'll see you in the next one, okay? For now, what do I always say? Oh, yeah. Bye for now. Bye.